So today's episode is a little bit different. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my own story. So a few people have been asking, you talk about your journey as an entrepreneur and having chronic fatigue syndrome, but what's your story? What's your journey? And so that's what I'm going to tell you about today. Welcome to the Less is More for Leaders podcast, the ultimate guide for leaders who want to achieve more by doing less. I'm Louise Ledbrook, a high-performance productivity coach and business leader with over 20 years experience. Get ready for a life-changing ride as my guests and I explore how you can create space in your life to focus on what truly matters, both in business and in your personal life. We'll be sharing simple yet powerful strategies and stories of success, so get ready to unleash your full potential. So if I think about, my specific journey with chronic fatigue syndrome, it started in high school. So here in Australia, our senior years, year 11 and 12, are very important. In fact, you need to do specific classes, you need to get specific grades if you want to get into the university degree that you're interested in. And so they're pretty important. And I studied in Canberra, so we went off to a college, which was amazing and lots of fun. And I was in year 11, so the first year of senior years, and I got an extremely acute, terrible case of glandular fever, or mono, caused by the Epstein-Barr virus. And this was towards the end of the first semester, so halfway through year 11. And I was so sick. I do not wish that pain. So that is the most pain I've ever been in my life. I do not wish that pain on my worst enemy. I have had 2 children. I've had multiple surgeries. I've been in a motorcycle accident, and this still tops the pain, right? And even with chronic fatigue syndrome, you have pain constantly. This pain tops it. And I was so unwell. I hadn't eaten or drunk anything for days. I couldn't actually physically put anything in my mouth. The pain was excruciating. So to give you some graphic detail, which you probably don't want, my entire mouth and throat was ulcerated. So it was like a giant open wound, the whole thing. So the pain was excruciating. And at one stage, a doctor came to the house and he numbed my whole throat and my mouth with this numbing agent that they use for cancer patients so that I could try and drink some water. And I threw it up basically, so that didn't really work because I hadn't eaten anything or drunk anything for so long. My stomach couldn't handle it. I was so unwell. I lost so much weight, and I didn't have any weight to lose. As it was, I was so skinny. Eventually they decided to take me to hospital after my mum pretty much probably begging them to do something about it. And they admitted me to hospital, and some of the nurses thought I was there for anorexia because I was so skinny. And this was the 90s, and what is acceptable back then is very different from what was acceptable back now. They treated me like crap because they thought that I was doing it to myself. They didn't know enough about anorexia back then either. They thought it was a condition where people chose not to eat, and they thought that's what I had. And some of the nurses knew, they understood the ulceration and what was going on there, but there were others that were terrible. I have this memory of being asleep, which was very hard to do back then because, when you're sick and you're in so much pain, sleep doesn't come easily. And I'd fallen asleep in the hospital. They'd given me a drip and all sorts of things by then, so it helped me heal. And this nurse comes in and wakes me up and makes me sit up, and she shoved jello in my mouth, and I spat it back out. And she's like, I've got 7-year-olds that behave better than you. I'm like, go feed them then. I was just like, that was painful. It was so painful. And it was, not fun. Anyway, a week in the hospital, and I recovered enough, could go home. And to be able to eat at home, I was given that numbing agent, but in a liquid form, so I could coat my throat and my mouth with this numbing agent to be able to eat at home. That glandular fever was the beginning of the end, so that Epstein-Barr virus has then had a huge flow-on impact for me, huge. And so as a result, it hugely impacted my heart, my liver, my spleen. Like, your pancreas gets affected. Like, it really gets onto some of those major organs, and so it really caused me a lot of problems. But I took 6 months, so I stopped school, so I dropped out of school, if you like, for the rest of the year, and I was going to then go back and start again the year after. So I was repeating school. So I took a lot of time to recover. Like, I gave myself lots of time to recover, but I was still a teenager, right? I still wanted to be a teenager. I still did teenage things once I could. Doctors didn't know anything back then to tell me not to. And eventually, or not that long afterwards, to be honest, I started getting other weird symptoms would start showing up. I started passing out. So I would, if I was really tired, I would pass out. If I had any alcohol, I would pass out. And now I know that with alcohol, I don't know if I suspect I'd probably developed it straight away. A condition called POTS, and that can be caused by the Epstein-Barr virus as well. And so I have a particular type of POTS that's adrenaline triggered, and so if my adrenaline's too high, it can cause me to pass out. And so spikes of adrenaline can cause me to pass out, or if my adrenaline's already raised and then maybe I get another spike, or if it's just raised too high, I can pass out. So when you drink alcohol, your body releases adrenaline to sober you up. And so because my adrenaline was always up, it would cause me to pass out. Anyway, I passed out a lot. Multiple concussions later as well. And yeah, so I was getting pain, a lot of pain, especially around, like, my liver was still really swollen, my spleen. So all of this was really swollen. My heart rate was erratic. It was always very high. And, tests and tests and tests. Nothing. And then eventually they decided that I had chronic fatigue syndrome. I think at that point they had seen a link between the Epstein-Barr virus and the chronic fatigue syndrome, at least. And so that was where they got to. But the doctors didn't know anything about it. And so sent me home and said, just get some rest, take some vitamin C, and good luck. Come see me if you need another certificate because you can't go to school. I'm like, I'm literally, I think pretty much by that point, I was, bedridden, I think it got worse still after that, after the diagnosis, but I was pretty much bedridden, could not go to school, brain fog, if you've been there, the brain doesn't work well at all. You feel very dumb. And eventually one of my I must have gone into the school for something, so I must have been able to get to school for something. Or maybe, I think it was I don't remember how this message got to me, because I feel like I didn't talk to her face to face, but I can't remember how this message got to me. My teacher got a message to me saying, you should see this naturopath. One of the other teachers at the school is seeing her for fertility or something different, but you should try a naturopath. And I'm like, give it a crack. Good, can't get worse. Because I just have these memories of lying in bed and so my bed was here and the light switch was maybe at most a meter away, but enough that I had to at least step out of bed to be able to turn off the light switch. And I'd be lying there just staring at this light switch going, if I could will you to turn off, because just getting out of bed to turn that light switch off was so hard. And it's not tired's not even the right word. You're exhausted, but mentally as well. So trying to get yourself to do things was really hard. Anyway, trundled off to this naturopath. My mum took me to this naturopath and, did a bunch of analysis, checked my blood tests, read them in a different way. So I think that's really important. Is she was a registered nurse, a retired registered nurse. So she'd been in the medical industry for years and was a naturopath. So had a bit of a medical background, she had a medical background as well, and looked at the blood tests differently, right? So the doctor kind of looks at it. I won't go into the detail in this podcast, but the doctors look at it in a very particular way based on the way they're instructed. Whereas other people who are specialized in this thing, they're looking for something different. They're looking for lots of drops in, so like maybe your liver function, your adrenals, all these things are in the good range, but they're at the low end, right? And so you add them all together and that makes you really ill. Anyway, they look at things differently. She did iridology, so she looked at my eyes and could see different things that were being impacted, and prescribed a diet, an exclusion diet to begin with, and supplements, a mountain of supplements. And it took a while to be able to take all of them because I was so sensitive, but I was determined. I didn't care what it tasted like or what it was. I was taking these giant tablets. I was determined that this was not going to beat me. And within 2 weeks, it only took 2 weeks, and I think my determination has had a lot to do with it, where you have to believe and really want that change. I had a notable difference, and I saw her every 2 weeks for a long time, years, and just got better and better and better. And then, so because by the time I'd had the chronic fatigue diagnosis, I was into year 12. So I got glandular fever in year 11, repeated year 11, was getting sick all through my second year 11, worse and worse and worse, and I was into year 12, so my final senior year, by the time I got a diagnosis. And so because of that, the way it works here is I was able to get enough points to get a year 12 certificate, so at least I could finish year 12, didn't have to do another year, otherwise I would have to do another year by doing work at home. But I didn't get enough points to be able to go to university. So that's really hard for a kid who has been working towards a goal of going to university and wanting that. And so I didn't let that bring me down, I think was the important thing. It kept pushing me in a direction that I didn't expect, but I didn't let that bring me down. I'm like, okay, this is not what I expect, but I'm going to embrace it and I'm going to run with it and see where this journey takes me. And I think that's super important to do that, because in the end, that mindset shift and that ability to maintain a positive outlook is probably one of the main thing that saved me. Like, yes, you have to then want to take all the subs and do all the right things and have all the different treatments. And I've had acupuncture and blood cleansing and like you name it, I've done it, right? So I've done all the things, but you have to want it. You have to really want it and have to believe it. And that had a lot to do with it. And so I had many ups and downs over the years where I had to learn what was right for me at different times in my journey. Yeah, because what's right for me now is not what was right for me before. I can exercise every day now. Yeah. Alcohol still affects me, so I don't do that a lot, but I can still do it. But if I did like back to back to back, that would cause all sorts of issues for me. But I managed to finish high school. I went on to study. So I went to a sporting college and I was wanting to go into the fitness industry. In fact, I wanted to go to uni to be a physio. So I went into the fitness industry because that was a pathway to be a physio. So I studied fitness and I wanted to help people rehab. But unfortunately, I kept relapsing. And so the fitness industry and chronic fatigue syndrome didn't really go. So I was like, what do I do with myself? And so I had a gap year and I worked and all sorts of different things. And I still didn't know what I wanted to do. But I'm like, I don't want to work in admin. Like it's great, but it's not filling me up with joy. And literally someone said to me, you're good with computers. Why don't you study IT? And I went, okay. And so I went off to uni and studied IT. And I found uni very hard with chronic fatigue syndrome because I found it a stress that I couldn't control. I couldn't control deadlines. I couldn't control the amount of work, all that kind of stuff. And so those stresses outside of my control I found really hard to deal with. And so I would continually relapse. And so I'm a forever learner. I'm still learning now. I do have 2 degrees, but they were hard work and were very detrimental to my health. So I wouldn't study that way again, but I study continuously now. So I'm constantly learning. but I have control over it. And the amount of work it takes, and like I don't have to do exams and things like that. I just implement it in my life. And so I'm learning that, understanding those types of environments that don't work for me and avoiding them, learning what it takes to get through those as well. So the systems I had to put in place for myself to be able to get through those situations, knowing my own cycles, understanding my own triggers, and really reading myself on a daily basis is really important, has been important to my journey. And when I went into entrepreneurship and leadership as well, I started to do a lot of work on myself, a lot of personal development work, Tony Robbins, all sorts of different things like that. And those things are because that's working on your mind. And that's really was like the last shift for me to really be where I am today. So I would say the last relapse I had was 2014. I had just done one of the most stressful projects of my life, and I've done some stressful projects. I worked on the merger of two of the biggest banks in the country. I was working ridiculous hours, basically camped out at the building, but it wasn't stressful in the same way this project was. It was stressful, and also I just had my second baby and juggling children, and so it was an environment I hadn't experienced before. I came out of there with a tumor in my head, but also linked to the Epstein-Barr virus, so interesting. And then years later I had another tumor in a different place, also linked to the Epstein-Barr virus, so it's a terrible thing, that virus. And but that was when I came out of that project, had another kind of smaller relapse. My relapses were much smaller by this stage whenever I had them. And then I went off to a Tony Robbins Unleash the Power Within, yep, UPW, walked on hot coals, all that cool stuff, but had like an epiphany mindset shift during this event. And that for me was the final piece of the puzzle. Was the words I use is acceptance, right? Because I still feel like I'd been fighting to some degree my reality up until then, going, this is bullshit. This diagnosis is bullshit. Chronic fatigue syndrome is not a real thing. It's the thing you tell people that you can't work out what you want, so you just give this blanket chronic fatigue syndrome. It's bullshit. And I just hated it. I was like, find what's actually wrong with me. And I do know that it was caused by the virus. The virus is still in me. I had at one stage, after my first child, had an actual glandular fever recurrence as well, which is different. And so I feel like I'd been fighting the facts. And I just had this moment of, actually, Louise, you have more control over this than you realize, or that you give yourself credit for. So I was driven, I was motivated, I did everything I needed to, but my mind was still taking up valuable energy. That resistance was still taking up valuable energy in my mind, in my body, right? It all comes together. You think about it, it actually has a physical impact as well. And so it was like this shift of, hang on, I have absolute control. I have absolute control. And you might not feel like you have that right now, and because if you're so unwell, like at that point of being bedridden, feeling like you have absolute control feels really hard. But you do. You have control over the next step. You have control over what you do, what you don't do, what you say yes to, what you say no to. You have control over those things. You have control over listening to your body and reading your body and then responding to that, right? And so when I now wake up in the morning and I go, something's not right today, I don't feel good today, I need to look at my plan for today and shift it, because I need to take it a little bit easier today. That's my level of control, whereas previously I might have been, oh no, I've got all these meetings booked in, what am I going to do? Move the effing meetings. Move the meetings. Postpone them. Don't go to them. And I know that, especially if you work in corporate, it's like, oh, you can't do that. Actually, you can, because if you want to be able to continue to be the best you can do those things. Yeah? And it won't be every day that you have to do that, but just thinking to yourself, even going, hang on, I could change those meetings, or I could miss those meetings, or I could call in sick. Just telling yourself that you have that level of control is sometimes just enough to shift things for you, to really release that burden of resistance. And that really was the final piece of the puzzle for me. I have not had a relapse since 2014. It's 2023 now. That's a long time. So, if I get to those times where I'm like, maybe I have been drinking too much, or I haven't been eating the right things, or, just not taking care of myself, not giving myself time, not looking after myself, self-care, not doing those check-ins with myself, and reshifting things when I need to, then I kind of go, oh, hang on, I'm not 100%, I'm not being my best me, I'm not feeling exceptional, so I need to change something. And then you kind of go, all right, these are things I know I need to change. Change my diet, stop drinking, maybe have some supplements, light exercise, whatever it happens to be, right? You need to learn those things and pay attention to those things and start understanding what it is for you, what works for you, what doesn't, so that you can heal physically and mentally, like I have, right? So I consider myself one of the success stories when it comes to chronic fatigue syndrome. I know not everyone has it, but the mind and the body work together. We are energy. Your thoughts are energy. Your body is energy. You need to treat it that way, and all of them impact each other, right? Vice each way, okay? And so feed your mind positive things. Speak to positive people. Speak to people that have got through it. Speak to people that have been on your journey. Listen to them, and they will help you, motivate you, drive you towards your own success, because it's possible, right? I don't have to be an anomaly, right? It is possible for all of us, but you have to look at all the pieces of the puzzle, and it's about lifestyle. It's not just, I went to the doctor and he said, do this thing. Okay, it is an entire lifestyle solution, right? And that's what I work with my clients on. I work with them on their entire lifestyle solution. Everything you do from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep. In fact, even while you're asleep, while you're at work, the way you run your day, the way you run your house, it all matters on your healing journey and your success journey. Yeah. So that's a little bit about my journey. If you have any questions, I'd love to, speak to you. Please reach out. I can tell you more. And if you liked this episode, like, share, subscribe so you can hear more. And if you want to work a little bit more with me, then join me in the Female Leaders Thriving with Chronic Fatigue free Facebook group. I talk more about this type of stuff. I do trainings and downloads and all sorts of things to help leaders who are burnt out, who have chronic fatigue, who are really pushing themselves too much and want a life of less hustle but super success, because that's what I'm after. I'm still, I'm driven and I love my success, but I also love feeling good. And so we want more money, more joy, more freedom. Hope to see you there.